Hello, and welcome back to yet another college football. Hold on. Let me make sure I can hear this. Imagine this video gets copyrighted for that. But listen, it is time. I can college football is almost upon us. NFL preseason is technically upon us, but it just doesn't compare, right? So about 3 weeks away from college football, less than that actually. Damn. It's only like 16 days away, I believe. So that's insane to think about. But let's get right into it, man. My first video. This is very difficult. What is the best way to break back into college football content? Is it a rankings video? Do I talk about an individual team? Do I just recap all the shit that happened in the offseason? I don't know. I decided to come back with my top 10 quarterback rankings in terms of returning college football quarterbacks. I'm obviously here with, accompanied by my 4 pages worth of copious notes here on the quarterbacks I'm about to discuss. And yeah, man, let's get straight into it. Longer intro than usual. And I decided to do a top 10. So before we get into the actual top 10 list, let's first talk about the guys who did not qualify. Obviously, it was a lot more. I really started off with like 30 names before eventually cutting it down to what I hear. So Haynes King, extremely experienced veteran of the game. He's like 24 years old, playing for Georgia Tech, had a real breakout year last season, really showcased his rushing ability, but I just don't think he's uh, as much of a threat as a passer. And also, Georgia Tech did lose their number one receiver, if I'm not mistaken. So I just don't have the most confident. Haynes, good quarterback though. Kevin Jennings of SMU played his first year, well, his first real year as a starter last season. Kind of burst onto the scene, had a really good record. As we all know, struggled mightily against Penn State. Just an awful performance. And yeah, I would like to see more. Maybe after this season, I would be very confident betting money that Kevin Jennings will be on this top 10 next season. So yeah, just too soon in my opinion for Kevin Jennings. Drew Aller. Listen, I have not seen, watched, reacted to anybody else's top 10 returning quarterbacks list. I have no idea what the public perception is around this video right here, but I can say one thing for sure. Drew Aller is being ridiculously overrated by the rest of the country. I can just guess, and I know it's true. And the more I ponder, in the past, I've been called, rightfully so, a Penn State hater and a Drew Aller hater and a James Franklin hater. And it's not hating when a team consistently loses every single big game they play, like without fail. When was the last? And listen, the playoff games they won last year don't count. I'm sorry. You can fight me if you want. They beat Boise State and SMU. Guess what Penn State did last year? They went 0 and 3 in the 3 biggest games they played last year. They lost to Notre Dame, they lost to Oregon, and they lost to Ohio State. Penn State doesn't win big games. I don't care if they beat SMU and Boise State in the playoffs. They should have beat both those teams, quite frankly. Penn State still has not gotten over their illness of choking big games. No matter, it doesn't matter if they made the playoffs, it doesn't matter if they made the college football semifinals. This cloud is still hanging over them. And a big reason for that is Drew Aller. Listen, he is Dak Prescott. And the reason I call him Dak Prescott is because he will look really good at times in the regular season. He'll look like a competent quarterback. He'll have great throws, big moments, all these things, right? But then when he plays in an elite defense, he can't do a damn thing. And listen, maybe some of the fault is on the Penn State offensive coordinator. Maybe they don't have enough receivers, but it feels like they always don't have enough receivers. Last year, they had two NFL caliber running backs and the best tight end in the country, and Drew Aller just completely fell apart. In the Notre Dame game, he was trash as always in the Ohio State game. People were giving him all the credit in the world. I thought that was more so on the running backs than Drew Aller. I thought Drew Aller actually played lackluster at best in the Oregon game. But if that's the best of Drew Aller in the big games, then brother, he is not even close to a top 10 quarterback. So yeah, Drew Aller, the Dak Prescott of college football, nice try, buddy. If you thought you were getting into my top 10, quite frankly, he probably wouldn't even be in my top 12 or 13. Taylon Green at Arkansas, transfer from Boise State, came there in his first season at Arkansas. I thought he looked pretty impressive. The few games I watched, he was just a monster in terms of production. I think he had like a 400 or 500 yard game against Oklahoma State, which they lost somehow. But I do expect him to take another step forward, even though they did lose their number one receiver and running back, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe not a step forward, actually. I just think he's a real underrated quarterback who doesn't get talked about enough. Diego Pavia, really close to making this list for me. I was really impressed by what he did at Vanderbilt. And, he was actually really good. Did he come from, what was it? Was it New Mexico State was his school before Vanderbilt? I thought he's put together back-to-back seasons of being a pretty good quarterback. And, I mean, quite frankly, he's just the guy where it's like every single game he is the underdog. He is always playing with less talent if he plays a power four opponent, but he just consistently shows up and performs. He's a really good running threat with his legs. So, yeah, just really impressed by him. Definitely not my top 10, but he might be in my he might be the odd man out here, number 11. And then Chandler Morris, the new quarterback for Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. He transferred from the University of North Texas. And the reason I included him on this list is because in terms of all the passing leaders from last season, he is the quarterback. Let me try and find a way to phrase it without saying well. Let me slow down. Of all of the passing leaders in college football last season, he is the highest who did not graduate, did not go to the NFL. He threw for more I cannot speak. He threw for more yards last season than anybody else active in college football right now. That I don't know why I couldn't just say that the first time. So he threw for like 4,000 fucking yards last year. He is back. He's at Virginia. The problem is Virginia sucks, so I don't think he's going to be any good. So with that being said, kind of the basis of this list is kind of looking at what the guys did beforehand, but also it is kind of a prediction looking forward because I have Arch on this list, for example. He's done nothing to this point, but I still do believe he'll be very successful next year. So I included him on this year. So it's kind of looking at what they did already, kind of looking at their talent overall, what I think about them, and then also kind of predicting how good I think they'll be next season. So I was pretty hit or miss with this list last year. I think I did 15 quarterbacks, but I had like Grayson McCall, Jalen Daniels. Who was my biggest miss? I think I had Caden Salter on there near the top. So yeah, I was all over the place last year. I had Brady Cook, for example, but hopefully this year, cutting it down to 10, I should be a little bit better here. Starting off with my number 10 quarterback, though. We have Josh Hoover out of TCU. Now, if you don't know that much about Josh Hoover, he is entering his fourth season at TCU. He's been playing the last 2 years as the starting quarterback. They lost their top two weapons to the NFL, that being Jack Besh and Savion Williams. And quite frankly, only one of their top four targets, their weapons, if you will, from last year, is returning. It's an air raid offense, right? So they don't really have any sort of a run game. And you probably could tell that just based off his stats. He absolutely aired it out last year. And not, to really any surprise there. That's just what they do at TCU now. He's not much of a running threat himself. Think of Will Rogers as an example for the air raid offense, smaller QB just based off his size and stature. But last year he had 4 games where he threw for at least 396. So basically 4 games last year of 400 passing yards, just insane. And he actually went 5-6 in his careers to this point at TCU in games where he throws for at least 300 yards. So unfortunately for Josh Hoover, it doesn't really matter how well he plays. TCU is just going to struggle as well with that defense being as difficult as it is. But here's the thing: TCU did win 6 of their last 7 games. Their defense did play much better as well down the stretch, and they went 9-4 last year. So I mean, listen, I hear a lot of people picking teams like Utah and even Baylor and just some real BYU, just some real teams where I just really don't feel like they have much of a shot. BYU, of course, with the quarterback situation now. But it's like I hear hardly anybody mentioning TCU. And they went 9-4 last year and they got their quarterback back. So I just feel like TCU should get a little bit more credit here. But listen, they're not going to have it easy at all because they play UNC, SMU, Arizona State, Colorado, and Kansas State all in the first half of the season. So they're going to get just peppered early on with tough games, and we'll see how they handle it. If nothing else, they should be getting into some very exciting shootouts next year. So that UNC game, week 1, that's a real slept on, not really talking about game. I'll be watching that one for sure. Moving on, though. Oh, sorry. Let me actually break down the stats here. So 2025, the stats, I do expect him to take a slight step back just in terms of overall production. Him losing most of his top weapons, I feel it's going to be difficult for a team like TCU to replace those guys. And, of course, not having a run game, you're putting a little bit more pressure on the quarterback there. So I don't expect him to have a career year necessarily, but I do expect him to be one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Number nine, I have Sam Levitt, the returning quarterback from Arizona State, entering his second season as their starting quarterback. Came from Michigan State and really shocked people in his first year. I don't think anybody was expecting him to be as efficient, as productive as he was, and he also showed up in the big games as well. Now, Arizona State, they lost their most important player in Cam Scattergoat. He was the whole team pretty much. I mean, he damn near single-handedly won them the Big 12 championship and kept them in the game versus Texas. Now, I don't expect Sam Levitt to be too impacted by that loss. He is, of course, from the mean streets of Westland, Oregon. If you know, you know. But listen, he. This is the problem with Sam Levitt is that in the big games they played, right, he dominated teams like Iowa State in the Big 12 championship game and as Kansas State as well. But he did struggle versus teams like Texas, BYU, Utah. No shocker there. These are really good defenses. He was a young quarterback, but I would just like to see more consistency in terms of these big games. Below average size, but he makes up for it with his running ability. He had 6 games last year with at least 40 rushing yards, so he's a threat with his legs. And also, with the loss of Cam Scattergoat, I would expect them to use Levitt in the run game more in order to try and make up from that lost production with Cam Scattergoat. He does get his top wide receiver back. Jordan Tyson returns from injury. He was a real dominant force last year. Really slept on. Not a lot of people talking about him, but there was a little bit of hype going around right now about Levitt and Tyson possibly being the best duo next season. They have a very light schedule until their road game versus Baylor, which is their fourth game. So I do expect Arizona State and Sam Levitt to be one of the hottest teams out the gate, if you will. I think they will kind of coast to a 3-0 or maybe even a 4-0 start, and I think they'll be in most people's top tens at that point. Moving on. I gotta talk about the stats first. So I do expect him to take a jump up really in everything. They're going to lean on him more heavily, of course, with the loss of Scadaboo. I do think it will result in more interceptions, but overall, I do expect him to take a step forward and kind of shouldering more of the load of the offense overall. So, yeah, do expect Sam Levitt to get better next season. Next up, number 8 is where I have Rocco Becht, the returning quarterback from Iowa State. Interestingly enough, the son of Battlehawks head coach Anthony Becht. Don't know if anybody here watches the UFL, but I do. So that was interesting that I thought of that. But he is in his 4th season at Iowa State. 2 years of starting experience. You can see how the numbers improved from his first and second year as a starter. The problem is he lost pretty much 2,400 yards of production to the NFL between his top 2 receivers, Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, both the Texans, ironically. But they have major question marks at the wide receiver position, which means they may lean more into their run game, in which they have 2 returning playmakers at that position. I mean, it was Carson Hansen or Kalen Hansen and Abu Sama. They have 2 pretty solid returning running backs. So I don't know if Rocco Becht is necessarily going to have the ability to replicate what he did last season. He's a little bit bigger than Josh Hoover, but a little bit less of a run threat than Sam Levitt, just to kind of place him in between these other guys here. But this is what I like about Rocco Becht last year. His touchdown to interception ratio against the 4 best teams he played last year, 9 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. He took care of the ball in big games, and he also showed up as well. Now, they do play Kansas State and Iowa in their first and third games, so he is going to be tested early against Iowa, of course, a really good defense. That game always seems to be like combining for 6 or 9 points or something like that. But Kansas State week 1 in Ireland, if I'm not mistaken, that should be a really interesting, exciting game. And I wouldn't be shocked if the winner of that game goes on to win the Big 12 championship. So moving on to number 7 here. This is where I have Arch Manning. Obviously, I think Arch is the toughest person to rank in like all of college football. I mean, how do you rank a guy who has 3 games of starting experience, but he looked really damn good in those 3 games, right? So, I mean, it's really tough. Obviously, he is getting, I think, more hype and more expectations than all that because of his name and the family relations, if you will. But listen, I'm not a hater. I don't have any sort of bias one way or another. He did look really good in 2 of those games, though, because it's his 3rd year at Texas. And what's interesting enough is, right, you would assume that his best performance would come against the worst teams. He was pretty much flawless against UTSA. He played like a perfect fucking game, like 5 touchdowns or whatever, 6 touchdowns, and then played great against Mississippi State. Now, you could make the argument Mississippi State is the worst team in the SEC. I wouldn't push back on that, but he looked really good against Mississippi State. And then he had a real bad game against UL Monroe, like two interceptions. I didn't watch the game, of course. I don't know if they were tipped or whatever, but he had like a 50% completion percentage as well. So I just assume he struggled overall. Don't know what that's about, but yeah, kind of a head scratcher there. He did showcase both his arm talent and his mobility, kind of separating himself from the rest of the Mannings in that category. Uh, I just can't put him in good faith any higher than number seven because I just don't have a clue. Right? He's never played a good team really, in his college career, but he does play in a system where you would assume that anybody that's competent would put up crazy numbers. He did lose his top three targets and his number two running back to the NFL, but I feel like at this point I can just confidently say that every year Texas is going to give their quarterback one of the best groups of weapons in the country, and I think this year is no different. Manning does possess prototypical size and athleticism for the position. And their first game, man, Ohio State. I mean, the winner of that game is obviously going to be in everybody's number one position in terms of just rankings overall. So he is going to have an opportunity against the defending champs to really showcase, I guess, what he's learned and taken away from this offseason. And listen, at the end of the day, I do expect him to have a monster. Like in terms of numbers and everything, I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the Heisman conversation. Like, just look at the position, right? I think he's better than Quinn Ewers. And, that's depending on who you ask, right? That's another controversial guy, I guess. But depending on who you ask, I guess you could say that's not really that much praise, or you can say, man, you can't say he's better than Quinn in his first year starting. But I think he does more than Quinn. I think Quinn really struggled in the pocket. I think when the rush got bad, he kind of just crumbled. I think Arch can use his legs if he's a little bit bigger, stronger in the pocket. I expect him to be better. I expect the Texas offense to be better as well. So we'll see what that ends up looking like. Did lose both of their starting tackles, though. That's always a bit of a concern when you're switching at both of those key positions there. But we'll see what happens. I have Arch at number seven. And number six is where I have Avery Johnson, the standout quarterback from Kansas State, the golden boy, if you will. In the past, last season especially, I will confidently say I was a hater on Avery Johnson. And it's really just because, for some reason, the fans were just crowning this guy. And listen, when you have 12 touchdowns and no picks in limited action, like as a true freshman, I can understand a certain amount of praise. And people were calling this guy like the best quarterback in the country, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, based off a nothing burger of a sample size. So I was kind of happy to see him fall short of those expectations. But now that that's over with, I have no hatred or bias against this guy. He's in his third year at Kansas State, over a year's worth of experience. And they did lose their best player on the team in terms of DJ Gins last year. He was the focal point of this offense. And I think without him, obviously Avery Johnson's going to be leaned on a little bit more. But he does return his number one receiver in J.C. Brown, as well as Dylan Edwards, the former Colorado transfer. So they should still be a dynamic, explosive offense. They also brought in four wide receivers through the transfer portal. So I think they're really trying to find the number two next to J.C. Brown. In terms of Avery Johnson's build, he's pretty much average height, slender frame, but he does have game-changing athleticism. When you watch this guy, his speed kind of jumps off the screen, and they use him creatively in the run game as well. He did have 7 games with at least 50 rushing yards last season. The problem is, against his 4 best opponents, right? 5-5 touchdown to interception ratio. That's got to improve, obviously. The whole Big 12 is kind of wide open. So if you struggle against the best teams in the Big 12, you're going to struggle against pretty much everybody. So, yeah. Poised to have a career best year in terms of production. I believe so. I think he'll set career highs in yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, all that. But will he show up in the big games? That is to be determined for sure. Number 5. This is where I have Lenora Sellers. I see Lenora Sellers as one of the biggest boom or bust quarterbacks on this list in the country, really. He's entering his 3rd year with USC. Exceptional performances against Clemson, Missouri, A&M. I watched that Clemson game, and I literally was like jaw dropped on the floor at some of the plays this guy made. It's like he had like 2 or 3 plays where I was like, what the hell? Like, if he had one of those plays in the game, I'd be like, damn, did you see that thing Lenore Sellers did against Clemson? He had like 2 or 3. It was just ridiculous. Like, he would not go down. He had ridiculous touch. It was insane, right? So that stuck with me. He does have prototypical size, and his rushing ability is certainly what sets him apart. He did lose his number 1 running back in terms of Rocket Sanders and their number 1 receiving option. I believe his name was Cody Simon or something like that, the tight end. And the wide receivers for South Carolina They just have to step it up. I do not think Lenore Sellers has nearly as good a group of weapons around him just for being in the SEC. And maybe that's the problem with South Carolina, but he's going to have to work with less than a lot of other people in terms of the offensive line, the running backs, wide receivers, all of that. He does have a lot of room to grow as well as a pocket passer, a little bit more raw than some of the other guys on this list, as well as some injury concerns. He did miss significant time in multiple games last season. So, and with how much they love to, hand him the rock and have him run the ball, that is a real concern that he might not be able to really handle that much of a role. So we'll see what comes of that. Uh, I do expect him to take a step forward, obviously, in terms of yards, touchdowns, everything like that. But here's the interesting thing. They could start off 5-0. In terms of an SEC schedule, South Carolina's is pretty favorable. I think they're ranked around like number 11 or 12 in the national ranking. So if they do start out 5-0, I believe that sixth game would be against LSU. That would be an absolutely massive game. And the winner of that could possibly be the number one or the number two team in the entire SEC. So keep an eye on South Carolina the first half of the season, really just the entire season, I guess. Moving on to my number 4 quarterback. This is where I have John Mateer, the standout transfer candidate rather, from Washington State coming to Oklahoma to play quarterback for the Sooners here. Spent 3 years in Washington State, and his first year as a starter, obviously with the departure of Cam Ward, was last season. He looked amazing. I mean, near 4,000 yards and 44 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions. Now, the quality of opponent certainly was not on the same case as some of these other guys. I believe they played like a Mountain West schedule last year. But here's the interesting thing, right? Because, to kind of counteract that point of the Mountain West schedule, he did play Boise State, Texas Tech, and Washington. And in those 3 games, he had 974 yards, so over 300 yards, well over 300 yards a game, 7 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. I believe they go 2-1 or 1-2. They lost to Boise. They beat they lost. Oh, they beat Washington. Did they beat Texas? I'm not sure, but like the point is, he looked really good against the best competition they played. So I don't really have that much concern about the level of competition changing from Washington State to Oklahoma. But obviously, still deserves to be mentioned here. 5 games with 5+ touchdowns last year. I'm not sure if that's the most in the country, but I would have to assume it's at least near the top of the list. He had some monster performances last year. Also, very dangerous in the run game. I mean, if you watch him play, they used him heavily as a runner, and he made big things happen. Below average size for the position, but again, he does have that game changing big play ability. And he arrives at Oklahoma as well as Jaden Ott, the standout star running back from Cal. So he's bringing some talent with him. Nobody knows what the wide receiver core is going to look like. I mean, they were decimated by injuries last year. They lost Nick Anderson to LSU, if I'm not mistaken. So who knows what the wide receiver core is going to look like? But they will get a bunch of guys back from injury. That much I can tell you for sure. And listen, if they can win week 2 at home against Michigan, they certainly could be 5-0 by the time the Red River game comes around. And if they are 5-0, what a massive game that would be for both parties. So I'm just hoping that happens at this point here. So John Mateer, number 4. And also, he does have multiple years of eligibility left. So strong case to be the number 1 quarterback on this list come 2026, if, of course, Arch decides to stay as well. Number 3 is where I have Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU quarterback. Now, interesting enough, the day I'm making this video, there was actually a report coming out about him possibly like tearing his ACL or whatever. Thankfully, those reports were not accurate, so we will get to see Garrett Nussmeier this season. He spent a lot of time. His 5th season here at LSU. He's been around for a long, long time. Finally got the chance to start last season, and he threw for over 4,000 yards. But he does have over 5,700 career passing yards as an LSU Tiger. Now, 8 games over 300 yards last season. They really opened this offense up for him last year. Obviously, had a really good, talented group of receivers. And the run game struggled. But towards the end of the season, guys like Caden Durham, I think they figured that out. And I do think they will have just a really loaded group of weapons heading into next year. In terms of Garrett Nussmeier specifically, below average size, not really any sort of mobility to speak for here. But in terms of a pocket passer, is one of the best in the entire country, maybe the best in the entire country. Also, just coming up in terms of if I had to pick a quarterback to have the most passing yards next season, it's between Garrett Nussmeier and my number 2 guy on the list right here. 2 new starting tackles, though. I mentioned it for Arch. I got to mention it for Garrett Nussmeier. And I think one's a freshman, one's a sophomore, so not a lot of experience there. And for in terms of a guy who's a pocket passer who may, struggle to evade the rush, that could be detrimental going forward. So that's my biggest concern here for the success of Garrett Nussmeier. And on top of all that, they do play their first game against Clemson. We know how much LSU struggles in week one, so we will see if Garrett Nussmeier can finally snap that streak. But quite frankly, I do not expect that to be happening here. Moving on. Number two is where I have Carson Beck. I mean, 4 years at Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. First year coming to the Miami Hurricanes, and he has just a ton of experience, man. Back to back years as starting quarterback at Georgia. I mean, big game moments out the wazoo. The problem is, though, dealt with major turnover issues at points last season. I think he had like 10 interceptions rather, in like a 4 or 5 game stretch. It was absurd, right? Because he's never even had that at any point. One of his strengths in 2023 was his ability to protect the ball and not make turnover worthy plays. But something happened last year. I don't know what happened, but he really went through a dark time there in the middle of the season. But he kind of bounced back from that. But when he was looking at playing some of his best football, suffered a major elbow injury against Texas in the SEC championship game, and he had to come off elbow surgery. So who knows what he's looking like right now for Miami. But listen, it's a completely new group of weapons for the Hurricanes. I mean, they lost like their top 3 or 4 receivers, top running back, top tight end. It's completely rebuilt there. But the lower level of competition here in the ACC, I think is really going to benefit Carson Beck, not having to play against Alabama or Tennessee or just some of the other A&M, some of the other best, Ole Miss, not having to play against this level of defense in the ACC. I think is really going to benefit him, and also just big game experience. I mean, how many other quarterbacks in this list have played as many top 10 opponents as Carson Beck? Now, he hasn't won all those games, but he's at least played in those games and understands the moment there. Prototypical size, not much of a run threat in terms of what he can do physically, but he should absolutely put up career high numbers here. I would be shocked if Carson Beck does not throw for 4,000 yards next season. And yeah, first game against Notre Dame is that an interesting storyline. He did not get to play against Notre Dame in the playoffs last year because he was hurt, of course. Can he come back and show that he still, is one of, if not the best quarterbacks in the country? Real interesting storyline to follow here. Carson Beck in Miami. And finally, my number one quarterback on the list, I think it should be number one on everybody's list, is Cade Klubnik. Now, interestingly enough, I was a hater especially 2023, but just overall, like my hate on Clemson, Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, it's been well documented, and I was ready to write this guy off completely after the Georgia loss in Week 1 last year. But after that game, he turned into an absolute monster. I mean, he's entering his 4th season now, over 2 years as a starter here, and consistent improvement year after year. He showcased his legs a lot last year. 9 games with over 30 rushing yards. I mean, and it truly, I mean, his worst game was Week 1 against Georgia. So if you try to judge him or like make any sort of assumption of his season based off that game, you would be dead wrong. 43 touchdowns to only 6 picks, over 4,000 yards. Something clicked for him in this. I think it was the second year under Garrett Riley, the offensive coordinator, and he completely unlocked the full version of Cade Klubnik. It's hard to even imagine him getting better because the numbers last year were just so dominant. But here's an interesting thing. Not a whole lot of exceptional physical traits, but he just gets it done. And my problem with Clemson for a long time was they just didn't have receivers. It was my problem with Alabama as well. Like they were known for producing receivers year in and year out, but they just went on a drought of not having any, NFL caliber weapons. And now they had a breakout trio of good wide receivers last season, and they return all 3 of those guys. So I mean, it just feels like a perfect storm really here for Cade Klubnik and Clemson. And they did lose Phil Maffa here, but that just means the offense is going to lean more into what Cade Klubnik can do for him. So I mean, it's really tough for me to see a world where he's not the best quarterback in the country next year. I mean, unless something like goes wrong in terms of injury or something of that nature. But if he's healthy and their receivers stay relatively healthy, I just expect him to continue to get better and carve up the poor ACC defenses, man. They got to deal with Cade Klubnik and possibly Carson Beck. Just that's a rough time there. It's not going to be fun to be like a UNC or a Wake Forest or a Syracuse or something like that, right? So that is going to be it for my top 10 quarterbacks list. My first college football video returning has completed. Leave a comment. Let me know what your list is, who you disagree with, the placements, whatever like that. And I will be back shortly. In terms of the next video, not sure. Might do a team spotlight on some team. Not really, haven't really picked a team yet, but yeah, come back shortly. I will be back shortly, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace. Oh shit, it's still recording.